I spend a little too much time actually sort of giving a about what people think. I sort of refuse to invest too much in status or rankings or whatnot.
Hollywood's golden age looked flawless on screen, but behind it, not every star was easy to work with. According to filmmaker Ron Howard, some actors from that era left lasting impressions for the wrong reasons, marked by difficult behavior, strong egos, and tensions that shaped life behind the scenes. So who were the actors he was referring to? And what really happened that made their reputations so complicated? Join us as we uncover the list of the 6 most evil actors of Hollywood's golden age, revealed by Ron Howard. Number 6. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was the devil behind the screen. His story captured exactly the kind of system Ron Howard later questioned. Errol arrived in Hollywood in the 1930s with no interest in subtlety. He spoke boldly and carried himself like someone who expected the world to keep up. That confidence translated perfectly on screen. As he continued working, his breakout role in Captain Blood made him a star almost overnight. Audiences saw a natural swashbuckler, effortless with a sword, fearless and magnetic in every frame. Warner Brothers leaned into that image, building entire productions around Errol's presence. However, off-screen, Errol lived with the same intensity, but without direction. He drank heavily, ignored every restraint, and treated excess as routine. Different stories about his bad behavior began circulating, but the studio system kept them contained. As long as the films succeeded, the man behind them remained protected. However, in October 1942, that protection faced its greatest test. Errol was charged with statutory rape after 2 teenage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterlee, accused him of sexual assault. Without any delay, the trial became national news. Reporters filled the courtroom and fans gathered outside. Some defended him, while others waited for a scandal that might finally stick. Errol, on the other hand, showed little concern. He laughed at moments that seemed to demand seriousness and projected the same confidence he carried on screen. His defense team, supported by the full force of studio influence, dismantled the prosecution's case. He was acquitted, and the verdict closed the trial, but not the questions. For many observers, the case revealed how fame and money could shape life outcomes. Around this time, the phrase "in like Flynn" entered popular language. It was an allusion to Errol Flynn's legendary ability to misbehave freely without consequences and get through situations untouched. After the trial, Errol did not retreat. His lifestyle grew more chaotic and his alcohol and drug use intensified. In his later published autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, he described his life without apology, reinforcing the image of a man driven by appetite rather than reflection. Would Errol's wicked ways eventually end? This was a question many looked forward to an answer for. However, years later, something eventually happened that made the consequences visible. Errol's career lost momentum and financial problems surfaced. His health also declined rapidly under years of abuse, and the energy that once defined him began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and instability. In 1959, Errol passed away in Vancouver at the age of 50. Medical reports listed a heart attack, cirrhosis of the liver, and related complications. It was a clinical ending to a life that had rarely been controlled. On screen, Errol's life shaped the template for the modern action hero, while his life exposed the limits of accountability in an industry built on illusion off-screen. That contrast is exactly why Ron Howard viewed him negatively. He claims his charm on screen didn't match what he represented off it, and it was beyond terrible. If Errol Flynn embodied corruption and a chaotic lifestyle, then the next person on this list represented something even more colder. Who is it? Number 5. Faye Dunaway. In conversations about difficult working environments, one name that frequently surfaces in industry stories is Faye Dunaway. Not through any direct feud, but as an example of how control can turn toxic when it overshadows collaboration. Ron Howard has often spoken about the discipline required to keep a film set functional, and how ego, when unchecked, can derail even the strongest production. Faye's case was a perfect example of this. Faye Dunaway rose fast and decisively. Born in Florida in 1941, she trained in theater before breaking into film with striking presence. Her performance in Bonnie and Clyde made her a star, sharp-edged and unforgettable. She followed it with roles that defined 1970s cinema, including Chinatown 1974, where her restraint and intensity carried equal weight. A lot of the audience admired her, and the directors also trusted her. She built a reputation as one of the most precise performers of her generation. But that precision came with a cost. On set, Faye developed a reputation for demanding absolute control over her environment. Crew members from multiple productions described long delays caused by lighting adjustments, repeated takes, and strict conditions around her appearance. At first, it looked like a simple commitment to craft, but after several experiences, it became something harsher. The stories reached a peak during the production of Mommy Dearest, where Faye portrayed Joan Crawford. The film itself told a story of control and emotional abuse, and reports from the set suggested an atmosphere that mirrored its subject. Co-star Rutanya Alda later described a tense environment, where the cast and crew felt constantly on edge. Director Frank Perry struggled to maintain balance as Faye pushed for complete authority over her performance and presentation. Other productions carried similar accounts. During The Wicked Lady, 1983, reports surfaced of clashes with crew members. On The Don Juan DeMarco Show, delays and disagreements again made headlines. These weren't isolated incidents, but part of a pattern that followed her across decades, an insistence on perfection that often strained the people around her. It was a whole lot, and it affected the team badly. Faye's defenders argued that the same intensity produced extraordinary performances. They pointed to her discipline, her refusal to settle, and the results that were visible on screen. Critics countered that film is collaborative by nature, and no performance exists in isolation. When one person dominates the process, the entire structure feels it. By the 2000s, that reputation began to affect her opportunities. Directors became cautious, and productions hesitated before they cast her. In 2011, she was dismissed from a planned Broadway revival of Tea at 5 after she allegedly slapped some crew members and threw things at them. This move drew the public's attention and reinforced the narrative that she had become difficult to manage. Faye disputed the decision, but the damage to her professional image had already settled in. Ron Howard often stressed that in Hollywood, behavior matters just as much as talent, and Faye Dunaway tested that belief. At her peak, she commanded the screen with precision and control, but on set, that same intensity could turn difficult. Her constant demands and rigid approach clashed with the kind of smooth and collaborative environment Ron valued. For Ron, it wasn't just a personal feud with Faye, but how her performance affected everyone else. Faye's brilliance was undeniable, but her behavior made working conditions tense. And that contrast is what shaped his negative view of her. Next is a woman that came with a very different kind of tension and strange personality. One that was even more unsettling. Number 4. Frances Bavier. Frances Bavier became a symbol of warmth to millions of viewers through The Andy Griffith Show. As Aunt Bee, she represented comfort and the presence in a town built on kindness. To audiences, she felt real. However, to a young Ron Howard, She was a distant person that never wanted to have anything to do with Ron. Frances Bavier was trained for the stage, shaped by New York theater, and carried that discipline into every role. By the time she joined the show in 1960, she had already built a career grounded in structure and seriousness. To her, the shift to a light, improvisational sitcom was not a natural fit and looked beneath her professional sensibilities. On set, that difference showed. While actors like Andy Griffith and Don Knotts leaned into humor and spontaneity, Frances kept her distance. The off-camera warmth that defined Mayberry did not extend easily into her real interactions. Ron Howard, who played Opie as a child, described her as reserved and formal, and somehow affected the on-set relationship between them. Although there was no hostility, but there was a noticeable absence of ease. For a young actor surrounded by laughter, that silence stood out. He learned early that what appears natural on screen is often carefully constructed behind it. Frances struggled with how she was perceived. Aunt Bee made her famous, but it also confined her. Years of serious stage work were overshadowed by a single television role. She reportedly worried that audiences would never see beyond it, and that tension shaped her behavior. She treated the work with precision, but not always with affection. Cast members have recalled that Frances preferred professionalism over playfulness. She was not drawn to improvisation and did not engage much in the off-camera bonding that defined the rest of the group. Over time, that separation deepened. While the cast grew closer, Frances became more withdrawn. When the series ended, she stepped away from the spotlight, retiring to Siler City, North Carolina. She declined many reunion appearances and lived a quiet, private life. Years later, shortly before her death, Frances reached out to Andy Griffith to apologize for her, at times, difficult behavior during the show's run. Ron, however, made it clear that while he respected Frances Bavier's professionalism, her cold and distant behavior left a lasting impression on him. She delivered on screen, but off it, the lack of warmth created a disconnect he never truly got past, shaping a low but firm dislike. The next person on the list came a different kind of challenge, one that pushed Ron's patience to its limits. Number 3. Tom Sizemore. Tom Sizemore built his reputation on intensity. In the 1990s, he became one of Hollywood's most reliable supporting actors, bringing raw energy to films like Saving Private Ryan and Heat, 1995, where he held his own alongside heavyweights like Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. Directors valued him for his edge, and he was a tough one just like the characters he played. That reputation, however, came with instability. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Tom's career became negatively affected by his struggles with addiction and legal trouble. Arrests, rehab stints, and public incidents began to overshadow his work. Productions that once relied on his presence started to factor in the risk that came with it. What is real is the environment both operated in. By that period, Tom had become a cautionary figure in Hollywood, someone whose reliability was no longer guaranteed. For directors like Ron Howard, known for disciplined and structured sets, that kind of unpredictability carried serious weight. Tom's issue became more about his absence. He missed calls, delayed shoots, and there was constant uncertainty of whether he would show up prepared or at all. In an industry where time is tightly scheduled and budgets are fixed, that kind of inconsistency affects everyone. His personal struggles were well documented. Methamphetamine and heroin addiction took hold during the peak of his career. In interviews, Tom admitted how deeply those dependencies shaped his decisions. He spoke openly about losing roles, damaging relationships, and watching opportunities disappear. At one point, He even described feeling like he was watching his own career collapse in real time, unable to stop it. "I looked like I was 100 years old. I had no relationship with my kids. I had no work to speak of. I was living in a squat. I just started to cry," Sizemore said, struggling to maintain his emotional composure. For filmmakers, that kind of situation creates a difficult balance. There is the actor who owns the skill, the experience, the proven ability to deliver powerful performances, and then there is the risk of the possibility that those performances might never materialize when needed. Tom's story began to build on different scandals, and each incident added pressure, and each missed opportunity widened the gap between what he could have been and what he became. At age 61, Tom died. The cause was later linked to complications from a brain aneurysm he suffered on February 18th, which led to a stroke. He had remained in a coma and on life support since the incident. By 2000s, the industry had largely moved on, leaving him to smaller roles and independent projects. He continued to work, but the trajectory had changed. His earlier career suggested longevity at the highest level, while his later years reflected survival. In Hollywood, talent opens doors, but staying there requires more. The next collaboration brought a different kind of intensity that brought tension on the set. Number 2, Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe entered Hollywood with a kind of intensity that didn't fade when the cameras stopped rolling. By the time he worked with Ron Howard on A Beautiful Mind, Russell had already built a reputation as one of the most intense actors of his generation. He was unpredictable and fully committed to every role he touched. For A Beautiful Mind, where Russell portrayed mathematician John Nash, he treated the role like a long psychological immersion rather than a standard shoot. That approach created friction and constant negotiation. Russell would question blocking, pacing, dialogue intention. He pushed for precision in a way that sometimes slowed production. For a director like Ron Howard, who values structure and emotional clarity, it became a balancing act. Protect the schedule, but don't flatten the performance. Ron Howard has described Russell during that period as someone operating at full intensity at all times. Not difficult for the sake of disruption, but uncompromising about truth in performance. That meant discussions that stretched long past convenience, debates over timing, and psychological realism. The tension was beyond something personal. Russell believed performance should feel earned through immersion. Ron Howard believed storytelling had to remain accessible and coherent for the audience. Between those two ideas, they built the film. However, there were other moments of real strain. Russell's reputation for a quick temper and public confrontations outside of set added weight to his presence in the industry. Everyone involved knew they were working with someone who operated at a different emotional temperature. But on A Beautiful Mind, that energy was largely contained within the work itself. At one point, Russell strongly advocated for a more linear approach to filming certain emotional arcs, arguing that John Nash's mental deterioration needed continuity of emotional progression. Ron Howard didn't agree immediately, but he listened. What emerged from that push and pull was a performance that became one of Russell's most acclaimed, earning him an Academy Award nomination and cementing the film's emotional impact. On their next collaboration, Cinderella Man, the working rhythm was more controlled, but Russell Crowe still brought an intensity that often made the set difficult to manage. For Ron Howard, while the results were strong, the experience remained tense, and over time it became clear he respected Russell Crowe's talent more than he actually enjoyed working with him. The final name on the list carried a reputation so large it blurred the line between being a legend and controversy. Number 1. John Wayne. John Wayne was one of the most controversial figures in Hollywood history. with a reputation shaped as much by his public statements and behavior as by his films. While he became an icon of American cinema through westerns and war films, his off-screen views and working style often sparked criticism and debate. One of the most widely discussed controversies came from a 1971 interview in Playboy, where John Wayne expressed strong political and social opinions. He made remarks about race relations, Native Americans, and Black Americans that drew backlash both at the time and in later decades. His comments were viewed by many critics as insensitive and reflective of outdated attitudes, and many people considered him to be a racist. On set, John Wayne was also known for his commanding and often intimidating presence. Crew members and co-stars described him as strict, quick to anger, and highly controlling about how scenes were executed. He expected discipline and adherence to his approach, and reports suggested that his disagreements were not always handled calmly. Some actors who worked alongside him recalled tense working environments where his authority shaped much of the production atmosphere. On one occasion, he bullied a co-star child actor on set and forced the child to do what he wanted. John Wayne's screen image often reinforced this off-screen reputation. In films such as The Searchers, he portrayed characters marked by toughness, pride, and moral rigidity. Over time, audiences and critics began drawing comparisons between these roles and his real-life persona, especially as debates around representation and ideology in film became more prominent. That wasn't all. John was also known for his strong opposition to certain political and cultural changes in Hollywood during the 1960s and 1970s. It was a disturbing experience for other actors in Hollywood, especially for Ron Howard. As the industry shifted toward more diverse storytelling and progressive viewpoints, John remained firmly aligned with traditional values and frequently voiced resistance to those changes. Despite the criticism, John Wayne never publicly distanced himself from his statements or softened his positions. He remained consistent in his views throughout his career, even as public opinion around him became more divided. John Wayne died in 1979, but the controversies surrounding his name continued long after his passing. Which of these actors' lifestyles and stories did you find most disturbing, and why? How much of what we see on screen reflects who these actors really were? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.